Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where you can equip yourself with the tools and insights to build the dream team your business needs so that you can lead with confidence, master your people challenges, and reclaim the freedom you deserve as a business owner. I'm your host, Jacob Karnes, a business coach and author of Master Your First Job. This week on the podcast, I interview Michelle Schafer. She is a career coach from Ottawa, Canada. She is an ICF certified coach. She has a book out right now called Cultivating Career Growth, which you can get on Amazon, and I'll also list in the episode description. And we have an incredible conversation about networking, why it's necessary for business owners, some limiting beliefs, and maybe you'll empathize with these like I did as far as what prevents people from networking, and one great question you can ask during networking to really exponentially grow your network. We also talk about what networking is, what it isn't. It's a very valuable conversation, I promise. If you're someone who hates networking, keep listening, because that was me, and I thought about it a different way, and this is an incredible conversation, and I think you'll find it very valuable with Michelle. I wrote a book called Master Your First Job to help first-time employees thrive in their roles and to help business owners and leaders better understand and develop their young talent. If you'd like a free copy of my book, not a joke, you can go to masteryourfirstjob.com/free. That's masteryourfirstjob.com/free and get a free e-copy of the book. There's also instructions to send it to your Kindle. And if you want a paper copy, you can get a link to buy that there as well. It's masteryourfirstjob.com/free. Let's dive into this great interview and conversation with Michelle Schafer. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Really excited for our conversation today. I'd love for you to share a little bit about you with our audience.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacob, for having me on as a guest today. So I'm a career coach. I specialize in career transition and leadership development. I've been coaching for about 10 years now, and I'm
Wow.
based in Ottawa, Canada. I've got 2 teenage boys, and I've got a partner who's a fierce cheerleader of mine. So they're all certainly part of my life. In terms of how I help individuals, so I help to empower individuals to navigate career transitions with confidence and find energizing work that they love for a company that believes what they believe in. So a lot of the individuals that I work with, when they come to me, they are, not feeling the love in their job anymore, wanting to do something else. They don't know what that is, and they certainly don't know how to get there. And for some other people, they already know that they need to find something else. They've started a job search and they're super frustrated because they're not finding anything. So I really help individuals to clarify what their career destination is, where they're going to be heading, and certainly to develop a plan. I like to think of looking for work as going on vacation. You need to have a destination and you need to have a plan to help you get there.
I like that. Need to have a destination, need to have a plan. No one's getting on, well, maybe some people will. I would never get on a plane or in a car with someone that's just like, all right, we're going somewhere. I can't tell you for how long or where we're going.
Exactly. Imagine going to Disney World and not having a plan and not having your fast passes and not having
That's
accommodations.
right.
Yeah, looking for work can be a lot, and it's a lot the same, and it can result in a lot of frustration when you don't have a plan because you're just kind of aimlessly sending resumes out and you
Yeah.
don't really know what you're applying for. You don't really know who you need to talk to. And so having a plan is really, really critical, like a job search strategy that is going to support you as you explore new paths.
That's huge. I'd love for you to share, what was your first job? Of course, I wrote a book called Master Your First Job. You're a
Yeah,
career coach. You have a book coming out soon, but what
I
was your
do.
first job?
So, way back when I was younger, I was the neighborhood babysitter. I mean, that was really
Nice.
my first job. I
Yeah.
did a lot of babysitting gigs. But after that, you might find this interesting. Maybe no other guest has said that this was their first job.
Okay.
I worked in my church office as,
Okay.
receptionist slash administrative assistant and
Yeah.
help people with different questions. So priests were my bosses in the early days. But I really enjoyed that job because, it was certainly very social, being part of the community. But also I learned a lot about just, how to use computers and, how to answer the phone properly
Yeah.
and customer service and
That's right.
all of those things.
I love it. The first one as a babysitter is great because that's typically cash and tax free.
Well, yes. Yeah, and the rates for babysitters have changed since I was doing
They
it. They're
have.
way more expensive now.
Way more expensive. Yeah, I looked it up the first time we had a babysitter for our daughter. I had to look it up. I'm like, "What do you pay a babysitter now?" I'm like, "I don't
Yeah.
know." And I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Gosh, I can't." Like my first job, I made minimum wage back. Actually, you know what's funny is it hasn't changed in the U.S., which is a whole nother conversation for another day. But I
Oh,
made
wow.
I made $7.25 at my first job, and
Gosh.
like
Yeah.
I remember getting a dollar raise to 8.25 and being thrilled. And then we'll just say babysitting was at least double that when I started looking up averages for where I live in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Babysitting was one of those gigs too. When you were on the roster of a few families in the neighborhood, you could be kept very, very
yeah,
busy. And I mean, just everything it teaches you at those formative, like kind of earlier teenage years, but, responsibility and, having to organize some, activities with kids and, protecting their safety. And I mean, all those things were big as a teenager, but,
yeah.
they certainly helped you in jobs later on too.
And referrals, testimonials, and raving fans are your best marketing,
Yes,
right? That's how you get
exactly.
all those gigs.
Yeah.
So you work as a career coach, but we've talked about a lot of this audience is going to be business owners and
Yes.
people in their career for sure. But something you and I have talked about is networking.
Yeah.
And I know networking can feel daunting to a lot of people. I know that in my previous job, we had a whole like meeting about LinkedIn and being engaging on LinkedIn. And I just kind of dismissed it because I'm like, I don't know if like LinkedIn's fake and I don't want to do all that. It's too much work. I mean, I hardly ever posted on my Instagram at the time. I was like, I just hate all this. And then
Yeah.
events networking just seemed like I don't know. I couldn't get past some of the fakeness. You know what I mean? I'm like, you could pick out the people in the room who were definitely just like they had an agenda, and so I wrote off a lot of networking. I think I got good at it in my previous role, but I know for a lot of people it can be very daunting, and I've gotten a lot
Yes.
better at it now as a business owner. But can you share a little bit why you're passionate about this and why the skill is vital for really anyone, whether you're a business owner, like 25 years into your career, just starting? Like, why is it so vital?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting just to hear as you're sharing, Jacob, that you had your own resistance
Yeah,
to
I
networking
did.
too, right?
Yep.
And you would be in a majority. I mean, when I talk to people, like whether they're clients or I also run workshops that help individuals and groups with networking skills. And I ask people, put up your hand if you enjoy networking. And maybe two
Yeah.
people out of 20 will put up their hand. And for some people, they enjoy it because it comes natural. Maybe
Right.
they just love conversations. Maybe they're a bit, maybe more extroverted in terms of personality. So there are a number of individuals who like it, but the vast majority of people would say, no, this is not something that I enjoy. I'm going to have to take myself out of my comfort zone. So I'm super passionate about this topic. I mean, for a few reasons. One, and you highlighted it earlier, I mean, as a business owner, this is a vital skill. Like it is critical to be involved in networking activity of some kind. So whether you're attending events, group events, or whether you are doing some like more, like networking one on one, like just conversation person to person, however you do it, it is something that is important for the growth of your business. It's
Yeah.
important to not only grow, but maybe even to pivot, to learn more about, other potential clients. That's all done through conversation. And so when I strip everything down, like for individuals who are really resistant to doing this, I'll say, believe it or not, we're networking every day, but we just don't know that we're doing it. So I like to call networking research through conversation. Like it's basically learning, it's learning about somebody else, about another business, about their challenges, about what it is that they need. You're learning. Well, that's research. And if, for any of your listeners who enjoy research, that's a foundation of networking. But the conversation piece is really important to take into consideration because we have conversations every day, oftentimes with people that we don't know. So let's say you have children and you drop your kids off at school. Chances are you're having conversations with parents at the school. Maybe you have a new neighbor that is moved in beside you and you introduce yourself. Well, that's a conversation with somebody you don't know. Or you go grocery shopping, you're talking to somebody either in front of you or behind you. Those are conversations too. What makes networking unique is that yes, it's a conversation, but it's a conversation about something. There's a purpose. And so, as a business owner, your purpose might be to learn about somebody's challenges or to
Yeah.
learn about how it is that you can support them, what products and services are particularly helpful for them, what it is that you need them to do for you, or vice versa. So, the conversation has a purpose, but when we strip it down, that's the way in for people who might be a little bit resistant. It's just about having conversations. And it's something that we can develop. It's something that does take practice. It is something that we have to kind of step outside of our comfort zone. And if I'm being really honest with myself, I mean, in my career, I've been restructured twice. I've lost my job twice. That's actually what led me to career coaching in the first place. Is I've been restructured, and I had a me to help
Yeah.
me find my next
Yeah.
job. But when I started off looking for work, I knew I had to network because I had to establish new relationships. I was looking for new work, something different than what I was doing before. And I made all kinds of mistakes. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I did is I only looked at my network. So that means all of the people that I was immediately connected to. And way back when, before I got into coaching, one of the things that I was interested in getting into was fundraising. People told me, "You'd make a great fundraiser, work for a not for profit and raise a ton of money for them." But I didn't know anything about fundraising. So I had to talk to people. Well, I looked at my network. And at the time, I only had people in the banking sector that I was immediately connected to. And I thought, well, none of these people can help me. They're in banking, they're not for
Yeah.
profit. So the big mistake I made was I discounted all of those people. And it wasn't until I learned the lesson that I need to look through my network, meaning each of the people in my banking connections, they all knew hundreds of people themselves. And was it possible that some of those hundreds of people worked in not for profit and I could talk to them to learn more about fundraising? Absolutely, it was possible. So that's, part of helping people just understand more about networking is, if you look at your network and think, well, I don't have a network, I'm going to call that a limiting belief. That's something that prevents us from taking action. But the reality is, we have hundreds and hundreds of people that we could tap into.
I think there's a lot we could talk about here. I'm glad you hit on one thing, which is I was going to ask. We're talking about networking. Well, how would you define networking? Which I'm glad you went into, because I think part of my pushback with being someone who's good at networking was, what is networking? And when I kind of took a step back and realizing, what you talked about, which is this idea of like relationships and research through relationships, I'm like, I'm good at that. Like, it's like, oh, just like talking to people and like learning about what they do with, I say with no agenda. I'll say I think it's okay to network with an agenda so long as you were willing to give as much as you're going to receive, right?
Yeah,
Like, I had a podcast guest recently after we got off was just like, hey, what can I do to like help your business or this podcast
yeah,
grow? And I'm like, yeah, like with that kind of question, I'm willing to send anybody to you that I can think of, because you've offered me some value. And I think when I went into it that way of like, hey, I'm gonna, I want to learn about what this person does. I think they can help me, but I'm gonna ask if I can help them in any way, and like I'm
yeah,
more than willing to do that. Because I realize I'm willing to do that on the other end, right? If someone's asking me for help, I'm
exactly.
totally willing to help. I think I was putting my like fears onto other people, I guess.
Okay.
So, I mean, I feel like I had some limiting beliefs when it came to networking. I know you've talked about 3 limiting beliefs when it comes to networking. What are they, and how can people reframe those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, before I get into that, I mean,
Yeah.
just one thing I'll just kind of add to what you're sharing, Jacob, is you hit on a really important point there. Networking is about relationships.
Yep.
It's not just about have the conversation, check, and we tick it off the list. A friend of mine that I met it was a business networking group like years and years ago, he had a saying. Networking is about the interaction. It's not about the transaction, which
Yep.
means it's all about that relationship, being able to add value to the other person,
It's great.
learn about them first before you go into like your own pitch and
That's
how you
great.
can help. So you're absolutely right. There are some foundational I'm going to call them limiting beliefs that stand in people's way. And I mean, really, if we strip everything away, a limiting belief is an assumption that we have about something or about a person. It's a judgment that we have. Oftentimes, as we're relating to networking, people will have assumptions and judgments about the process, about themselves in the process, that actually cause them to not do anything. They don't take any action. So, one of the big limiting beliefs that I hear from people is, people are too busy. So, people have got their own lives. I don't want to bother them by, asking for their time or asking a question or having a conversation with them. And the reality is, if you believe that, like people are too busy, they're not going to want to help me, then you're not going to do anything. So, a good way to reframe that one would be, instead of just thinking that people are too busy, remember that a foundation of networking is that people want to help. I'm going to say the vast majority. Not every
Yeah.
single person does, but I would say more than 90% of people do.
Yeah.
But you just need to ask. So ask and you might get. I have a saying, with my clients, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask for the conversation, you get nothing. Even if they say no, you're not any further behind in your planning or for people in your job search. But if you ask and you get a conversation, you could be very far ahead. So reframing the people are too busy belief is one of the big ones that I hear from my clients. Another one that I hear is that resistance to reaching out to people who are more senior than themselves. And so the limiting belief in that case is, why would the CEO want to talk to me? Why should I reach out to that person? And again, if you believe that, you may be denying yourself the opportunity to get connected to somebody who's really helpful. And so a great way to reframe that is to remember, maybe the CEO or the executive director is the head of their organization. But at the end of the day, first of all, they're human, so they still want to help. They've also had to do this. Chances are the CEO didn't get to be the CEO by magic. They had to network a whole lot themselves. And so remembering that they will want to support this kind of activity is really key. A quick little story to share on that one is I got one of the best jobs that I ever had because I reached out to, it was the chief medical officer of health in the city of Ottawa at that time. And I first had that limiting belief. This is the chief medical officer of health. He is responsible for every health crisis that our city has. Like, why would he want to talk to me? He doesn't even know me.
Yeah.
And I waited and I waited. I waited like probably about 3 weeks before I did anything. But then I decided, you know what? If you don't ask, you don't get. Like, if he says no, fine. But if he says yes, this could be very good. Well, he said yes. And he gave me half an hour of his time. And he asked for my resume, sent it on to HR. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Ottawa Public Health and saying that, yeah, we have a contract. Do you want to take it on? And at that time, that totally fit the bill for me. I never would have gotten that had I not reached out to the senior individual. So reframing that limiting belief can really open up some doors. The third limiting belief I heard a little bit about what you were just sharing before too, is I don't know how to do this. I'm not going to be good at this. So I'm just not going to do it. And if you believe that, then it's going to be hard to be able to take any kind of action. It's having a plan, like, engage in networking activity. It's about having an approach. It's about, knowing who you want to reach out to. It's about knowing what kind of questions you're going to ask that person. It's knowing how are you going to talk about yourself when the conversation turns back around to you. So when you network with some kind of an approach or a strategy, it can really open up some doors. And I find it's having the plan that increases the confidence and increases the comfort level to doing this kind of activity. And it's kind of like, practice makes perfect. Nothing's perfect, but certainly the more that you practice, the more comfortable and confident you're going to feel.
That's huge. I want to go back to something you said, which is the asking and getting, and not asking and not getting.
Yes.
By the time this comes out, you will have a book out, and I'm sure
Yes.
you'd be asking for reviews on Amazon, which is something I had to do. And let me tell you something. I hate asking for help, period. But I really hated asking people for reviews because I'm like, oh, like someone told me to literally go through your contact list and take a day, and it's like, okay, all people A through G, you're sending a
Yeah.
personal text out to ask for a review today. And I'm
Yes.
like, well, what if I haven't talked to this person in 3 years? And it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, hey, how's it going? Can you leave a review of my book? And basically they said, if that person reached out to you and was like, I wrote a book, can I get a review? Like, what would your response be? And I'm like, oh, I'm happy to. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care that I
Absolutely.
haven't done that. I'm just happy for you to write a book. Tell them what to say. I'm happy to say it.
Yeah.
And that helped
That's
me get
such a
over that,
great reframe.
just like, hey, almost just flip the roles here of put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'd have no problem with that. I'd encourage you. Like, please ask me. I'd be mad if I found out you read a book and you didn't tell me. You know what I mean?
That's a great reframe. And it just opens up the door, right? Like what you did right there, just even for yourself, is you took what was a roadblock,
Yeah,
something that was standing in your way, and you were able to flip it around such that it opened up that path for you to take action.
that's
And,
right.
I'll talk to, clients of mine, especially who, in my case, they need to find work. Some of them have been restructured. They need to
Yeah,
find work
yeah,
quickly. And a lot of them are very resistant to networking. They just prefer to be in a job search where they're looking online, they're sending out a ton of resumes, and that's it. Where I'm going to say like 80% of the activity to find work is actually in the networking, believe it or not, it's in the relationships. But when I talk to them about that and they say, oh, I don't want to ask, again, people are too busy. Like, I don't really have anybody to ask. And I say, okay, let's just like take a step back. So let's say somebody came to you and let's say, I don't know, this person's an accountant and somebody comes to you and says, oh, I'm thinking of accounting as a career path. Could I just, sit and pick your brain for 15 minutes? What would you say? And they said, well, I would help. And I said, so is it possible that when you ask people for help that they're going to respond in kind? And they kind of sit there, they kind of look off to the side and they say, well, yeah, I guess so. It's just about opening up the door and reframing. And I find, like those limiting beliefs can be very deep. And for some people, actually, I do a lot of work with newcomers to Canada, helping them to find work. These are individuals who have been on Canadian soil for maybe 2 months. They
okay.
really
Very,
don't
very
have
recent.
much of a network. And they also have home countries that frown on networking. Like you would not do
Interesting.
this at all. So there's a lot of reframing that needs to go into those kind of conversations.
Yeah,
But I find that when individuals start to, really believe what the truth is about networking, which is in the reframing, then they start to take action, well then they get results and they realize, you know what, networking works. Why was I so hesitant up until this point? And I find when you start to get conversations, you start to learn, and it leads, for business owners, when it leads to more conversations, you always want to have a full funnel. You never want to let your funnel get dry and have no leads. You always want to be able to reach out to people. But that is usually what is the convincing factor. They see the results, and results leads to more activity.
that's huge. I think with networking, when I think through the lens of a business owner, I might, especially if you have an established business, we'll even say like a franchise business, and I'm like, okay, why should I network, and who should I network with? What do you think about those two questions?
Yeah, I mean, those are two great questions. I mean, why should you network? I mean, goes back to the very lifeblood of what it is that you're trying to do with your business. Like, are you trying to grow your business? Are you trying to, gain new clients? Are you trying to, create awareness maybe about some new services or products, and even just learn about the pain points of people that would be your ideal clients? If you answered yes to any of those things, networking is important.
Yeah,
Like it is something that needs to be done. Can you get information in other ways? Of course, there's other ways, but networking tends to be the most effective because, back to something that you shared earlier, Jacob, it comes down to the relationship. You're building a relationship with someone. And I find that with networking activity, what starts with as one conversation will lead to other conversations if you steward the relationship properly. If you treat it like a transaction and yeah, I had this conversation, I'm going on to the next one, you're not going to grow. But if you treat it as a relationship, then you will grow. And so, it's becomes then all about taking the opportunities to be able to engage in networking activities. I mean, you shared something like at the top of this conversation that, a lot of people will feel, okay, this is time consuming. This is hard. Like, I'm a business owner. I'm trying to grow. I'm like hiring
Gotta
people.
make
I'm
money.
like
Yeah.
all these things, right?
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't have time to network.
Yeah.
And I mean, my question back would be, do you have time not to network? Like, is this something that you can do because it's going to have negative implications? So, you don't have to make it hard on yourself. Like, it doesn't have to be this big thing. I would say, as a way in to integrate networking into your daily life, remember those conversations. Like, literally put on your curiosity hat, get curious about people, get curious about what drives them, get curious
Yep.
about the challenges that they have. You're curious right here in this conversation with me, right? Like, one question is leading to another because you're curious and you want to learn more. Well, you can take that approach as a business owner just to your day to day. And I mean, I find that networking doesn't have to be a formal, established, let's set this conversation up kind of approach. It can just be somebody that you meet on the street, like a neighbor, or, I'll give you an example. Like, one of the participants in one of my networking workshops, she was actively looking for work, and she dropped her son off one day to play hockey at a friend's place, and they were playing street hockey. And so one of the parents was out there, the dad was out there. So, like, the mom and the dad, they just started talking, and the dad said, "Oh, what do you do professionally?" And she said, "Oh, I'm looking for work." And he said, "Well, what are you looking for?" And she was looking for a job in tech and IT. And he said, "Well, I'm the CIO of a large tech company here in
Yeah.
Ottawa. Send me your resume." Well, she sent the resume. A resume led to an interview. The interview led to the job. What happened there? It was networking
Networking.
that
Yep.
happened when she dropped her child off.
That's right.
So don't discount those everyday opportunities. It can be a great way to integrate networking just into your regular day. There's obviously more formal opportunities. I mean, yes, you still are going to want to reach out to people and ask for their time. Yes, you are still going to want to take opportunity for, events that are happening in your community, or virtual events that are not in your community that could be excellent opportunities to network. So just know that there's lots of different ways. It's not just one approach, and
Right.
it doesn't have to be a formal meeting most times.
That's huge. And I'm glad you mentioned curiosity. Curiosity is actually something I wrote about in my book in chapter 3.
Mm,
And it's one of these skills that I say, like, as a young person, if you learn it, that you'll use it for 25 years. Because at the end of the
exactly.
day, I think curiosity is one of the things that leads to networking and good networking
Yes.
and good relationship building, because
Yeah.
you're showing initiative, you're asking really good questions, and it's all because you're just curious, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just curious about what someone else does. Again, like your friend example, it was just, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm just looking for a job. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm a CIO
Exactly.
of a huge tech company, which
Like,
is
who knew?
right. And that's how it goes. So I know you've mentioned there's one question people can ask, and I'm really curious about this in every conversation to exponentially grow their network. I'm getting my pen and paper here. What is it, and why is it so effective?
This is a big one. It's a game changer for people. And I mentioned that dry funnel. This is going to be something that adds leads to your funnel, which is you ask towards the end of a conversation, now that you know a little bit about me, how I can help, what I offer. Who else in your circle would you recommend that I speak with? And a lot of people miss the opportunity to ask that. Comes down to limiting beliefs. People are hesitant. They think, "Oh, well, this person just, graciously gave their time to me. How can I possibly ask for something else?" And the thing is that this is an expected question. We are kind of hardwired again to be able to help each other. And so to be able to, help grow somebody else's network by making a connection or an introduction is not a huge ask. A lot of it does come down to the fear. What is that person going to say? Is it going to
Yep.
seem like I'm ungrateful? Does it seem really pushy if I ask that? And, when I frame it in the way that I have exactly right now for your listeners, and I ask even my own clients, and I say, so if you were on the receiving end of that, would you feel like that was like arrogant or pushy or too much. And they say, well, no, because, you're just positioning it as you're looking for other perspectives. And you can even say that I'm doing some research right now. I'm seeking out some other perspectives. I'm gathering information. So with that, is there somebody else in your circle you could connect me with or feel that I should speak with? Again, it comes down to, if you don't ask, you don't get. If the person says no and it ends there, you're no further behind, but you
Yeah.
can be very far ahead. And, especially in the context of a job search, and this would apply to for business owners trying to grow their business and gain new clients. It's, when you ask that question, the individual that you speak to might refer you to one person, two people, five people. That's going to lead to more conversations. And so imagine then with those new conversations, you ask that question at the end. Well, you're going to get again another contact or two contacts or five contacts. Your network is going to grow exponentially by simply asking that one question. And if you don't ask the question, you're missing a really critical opportunity to grow your network and possibly grow your business, grow your clients, grow your followers, all of those things.
That's huge. That's a question I got taught at my previous job to ask, just about like,
Excellent.
hey, who else do you know that could help me with this?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that opened the door for getting like an easy intro, right? Like
Yeah.
either I'm reaching out, I'm saying, hey, I talked to Michelle, who we both know, and she recommended I reach out to you, or Michelle sitting here setting up an email between me and the person I want to meet, saying, hey, I met with Jacob. I told him to meet with
Yeah.
you. Here's a great intro. And it's such an easy open
Exactly.
door for networking.
And it doesn't take long, like,
No,
for somebody to tee up that kind of introduction, it might take them 2 or 3 minutes of their time. And I mean, as we're talking about networking, the most effective kinds of, introductions or requests for somebody's time come from those warm leads. I mean, yes, do cold reach outs work? Like they can if they're done in a certain way and the other person is receptive, but they tend to not be the best investment of your energy and your time. They don't really produce the same kind of return on investment as a warm lead does. So, if you reach out to somebody and there's no connection, that person's going to look at your email and say, well, I don't know this person. Yeah, I am kind of busy. I'm not going to be able to have time for them. But if somebody that you have as a mutual connection is able to open up that door, well, now that person is more likely to say yes because their friend or former colleague is saying, you really need to talk to Jacob. That's the best kind of introduction, but we need to ask for those kind of referrals and that kind of help.
that's huge. If there's one takeaway from our conversation that you're like, if people could walk away with one thing, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's hard to narrow it down to one because I have some sayings as it relates to networking, and these can be easy ways for people to just kind of like take away some of these best practices. I've mentioned this one a number of times. If you don't ask, you don't get. That's going to be your
That's
way
right.
in to get more conversations. Networking is like going on vacation. You need to have a plan. So having a strategy is key. And look through your network, not at it. And it's all about the interaction, not the transaction. I mean, those are like four key sayings that I find really lead to those big takeaways that can be really helpful to help people up their networking game.
That's amazing. And I love I mean, the worst thing that can happen is they say no, right? And that's not really a bad. That's kind of where
Exactly.
you're at right now, anyway. Is a no.
Yes. You're
My,
no further
that's
behind.
right. No
They have
further
nothing to
behind.
lose.
I know you've got a book coming out. Where can people connect with you, learn more about networking strategies, or get a free chapter of your book?
Yes, yeah, there's a few offerings. So the certainly an easy way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I write very frequently about career transition topics. Networking is one of those topics that I do talk about from time to time. So please do follow me or even connect with me and let me know in your connection requests that you heard me on this podcast with Jacob. You can also email me if you have questions about networking, reach out directly to me. My email is michelle@mschafercoaching.ca. referrals.ca. And yes, I've got a book coming out. I'm really excited about this.
Out now.
Yes, that's right. Out now. It's called Cultivating Career Growth, Navigating Transitions with Purpose. I've got a full chapter on networking. And if you have anybody in your circle who is looking to explore career paths, this is a good way to kind of get access to the A to Z system to support you with that. And you can sign up to receive a free chapter of my book by accessing mschafercoaching.ca/cultivating career growth. You can put in your name and your email, and the free chapter will come right away to you in a downloadable way.
I love it, and I'll have all that linked below in the episode description. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Audience, thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.